Sudan. Where do I even start? There's so much to this country, but I didn't know anything about it before coming. Sudan is part of the immense Sahara deserts, and it's a harsh place to be in, with nothing really interesting happening there. One road, intense heat, crazy winds, a few wild camels roaming the vast stretches, and that's it. But my perspective was about to change forever. I was about to explore Sudan like rarely anyone did before, with a bicycle, and with enough distance to make it quite challenging. Let me introduce myself. I'm Rob, and I'm cycling the entire length of Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town. I'm not just doing this for the physical aspect of the challenge, but especially to learn about the world and myself through this journey, all while documenting everything. And ahead of me were the 1,000 kilometers I had to cross through one of the most remote regions of the world, Nubia. Through Sudan's heat, sand, and wind, I'll be exploring as much as possible and go deep within the culture. Whether we're talking local fresh food, all the low-key gold mining operations, the unknown traditional music, or that forbidden illegal alcohol, I'm showing you all the secrets the land has to offer. I am also about to learn about the incredible forgotten history, the ancestral technology and knowledge used by the Nubians, the beliefs that formed the land, the wild and crowded camel markets, the crazy economics of the region, and above all, the exceptional warmth of people. Sudan is not going to be an easy ride. It will be very windy, very hot, and very remote. Crossing the Sahara Desert is no joke, man. But within the discomfort, it will be equally as epic. Sudan, here we come, baby! Woo! This is episode 4 of Project Africa. The Sahara Deserts, the largest hot deserts on Earth. It's hard to believe that with the help of 2 wheels on my legs, I'll be crossing it. Even more exciting, I'll be doing so in one of its most underrated sections. In Arabic, Sudan means the land of the black, El Sudan. The country is currently in a full-blown war, which erupted only a week after we had left. But that's a story for another time. Let's rewind to when I barely knew anything about Sudan and was about to discover a land full of surprises. Before getting there, all I knew about the country is that it's Muslim, speaks Arabic, and is basically all deserts. I also briefly knew about its bloody history, the fact that it's heavily sanctioned by foreign powers, and that it's always grey on maps because of the lack of data coverage. The thing is, Sudan is so big that it's hard to comprehend easily. The territory is a lot more diverse than what is usually portrayed, and is a complex bridge between the Arab world and sub-Saharan Africa, constantly swinging between its two identities. And I was just at the edge of it, about to learn so much. My adventure resumes right at the border between Egypt and Sudan with my friend Florence. Sudan and Egypt border. After taking the ferry across Lake Nasser, cycling 30 kilometers to the border with a dog at our side, and finishing all the paperwork early morning, we entered the new land. Crossing into Sudan right now. Surreal! As soon as we crossed, the change was very noticeable. As expected, it was a lot more wild, calm, and empty than Egypt. First few minutes in Sudan, we have made it, and surprise! There's no cops behind us! It's incredible, it's just us in the road, and the sky and the sand. I mean, look at the landscapes. We're literally the only ones on the road. We headed to Wadi Halfa, the first and one of the only proper towns we'd encounter for the next 1,000 kilometers, until we reached Khartoum, the capital city of the country. This whole region from south of Aswan to approximately Khartoum is called Nubia. It has a rich and ancient history, its own language, and its own distinct culture and way of living. There was one word to summarize this first day across Nubia: freedom. This first day in Sudan is like therapy. But I knew that feeling wouldn't last, as it was based on how crowded and hectic Egypt was in comparison. And that got me thinking, how boring can this desert crossing really be? I mean, just looking around, there's nothing in a desert. All we were seeing was an abnormal amount of wheel peels from trucks, all types of animal corpses and bones, typically cows and camels that die from the heat, and a constant reminder of the crazy distances ahead. Yeah, at first glance, not a very warm welcome to this land. Actually, very warm. I mean, you get my point. It was f***ing hot. Thankfully, Flo and I had extra company that made things a bit more lively. In Egypt, we cycled with 3 people we had just met. 2 Egyptians, Shahab and Sharif, and a Dutchman, Tim. And this time, someone else we had just met was also tagging along. Someone who weirdly had a lot of common points with Dutchman Tim. We got a guest cycling through Sudan with us, and his name is also Tim. He replaced the other Tim. He's also blonde like the other Tim. He's also 21 like the other Tim, also European like the other Tim, and also makes daily videos like the other Tim.
Yeah, follow me!
Tim started cycling from France, and his destination was also South Africa, just like us. We connected through social media, and happened to be cycling across Sudan at the same time. In his normal life back in France, he's a medicine student, and through his project Dream Team, he's raising money for a charity that focuses on making the dreams of ill children come true. As we arrived in Wadi Halfa and played the unavoidable football game with the local kids, it was time to get ourselves sorted for the journey across the country.
First step is exchanging money at the black market, and it's quite an experience in Sudan.
Cash is king in Sudan, especially as a foreigner. There are no ATMs in the whole country except for this one hotel we later found in Khartoum. The reason? Heavy sanctions imposed on Sudan and the economic crisis. I mean, it's a pretty long story.
Because of the inflation, you got bricks of money when you exchange Egyptian pounds or dollars to Sudanese pounds. It's pretty crazy, honestly. You have to plan extra weight for the money that you're going to be exchanging on the bike. And every ounce counts, so yeah, crazy.
Sudan is expensive. We exchanged the equivalent of $150 each to survive for the next 12 days. When you're bikepacking, that's considered a lot. When we travel the way we do, we're not spending anything on our transportation or housing. Our usual expenses are for food, things like SIM cards, gas for our camping stove, and sometimes large quantities of drinking water.
This is how we prepare for the desert. We carry huge bags of water.
As we left Wadi Halfa, we hit the infamous 450-kilometer stretch of roads that didn't even exist until 2011. Before this smooth paved tarmac, there was a sand road that was barely cyclable and super desolate. But even with these new roads, the area was extremely remote and we rarely saw any vehicles. But my expectations of boredom in the desert got shattered about 20 kilometers in when we made our first fascinating discovery in Sudan. We first see an old man with a machine in hands, searching for something. Then a second man appears with the same metal detector looking machine. We asked what they're searching for and they answered dahab, which means gold. I didn't believe it. They must be searching for metal scraps that the trucks left behind or something like that. But further down Desolation Road, we see two other guys with similar looking machines in hand. Yeah, it was definitely metal detectors. After talking to them a bit, they said the same thing. They were looking for gold. And it was true.
Who would have thought that in the middle of the desert of northern Sudan, you can find gold? This is an actual gold mine.
So in the lawless lands of northern Sudan, you see a lot of people with metal detectors just trying to find gold, and it's pretty incredible, to be honest. Northern Sudan is loaded with gold, and the only people we were seeing here for the hundreds of kilometers we were cycling through were gold miners. And at first, I was in total disbelief.
So we just stopped on the side of the road. We saw some workers that were just trying to hit some rocks and cut them open. And we asked one of the guys, "What are you guys doing? Is it gold?" I said that while joking. He said, "Yeah." And they're actually digging for gold here, which is absolutely nuts. This is the hole right here. صار لكم قد ايه وقت عم تحفروا؟ 3 شهور. في كتير ذهب أو مش كتير؟ بسيط بعد. It's 40 meters deep and they've been digging it for 3 months now. I thought the desert had nothing to offer, but apparently a lot more than what we think.
What we were witnessing is the classic gold fever, a gold rush that pushed the poorest to the edge of society, risking their lives every day in those sketchy mines or under the harsh sun and winds, identifying, breaking, and sorting to save up a bit more money for their families. And many of them are young teenagers with no proper gear or protection.
Those guys have no protection, no helmets, nothing at all. And they live here actually. They're sleeping in the tents behind me. And they're super nice, they're super kind. So, like, they're super curious, they're as curious as us actually.
In the next days, we met many other gold searchers and miners in northern Sudan, each being as nice and welcoming as the other.
السلام عليكم.
شو اسمك انت؟
وردي.
وردي.
نعم.
شرفنا.
شرفت.
شو عم تعمل هلا؟
جهاز ذهب.
ذهب.
He found gold.
صغير.
Wow. This is gold, guys.
شفته مع الحجر.
Werdi then told me to follow him to the camp, where we met more gold miner friends of his.
السلام عليكم.
Got invited by some of the gold miners for some tea. They're very hospitable, it's amazing.
They barely own anything, live challenging lives, but are still willing to share their meal with us. They were cooking muluha, one of the first dishes we got introduced to in Sudan.
Muluha, it's like some fish stew with a kind of crepe that you eat with it, and it's really good. It's a bit spicy, but it's very flavorful. Muhammad Werdi are bringing me to the beer, the gold mine. Small quantities can actually make a living for them. And 2 months a year he actually goes to Cairo when he has enough gold, and he sells it there, then he comes back and digs for gold for the rest of the year.
We were witnessing the bottom of the jewelry chain. Simple farmers leaving their modest villages along the Nile in the prospects of making themselves and their families rich by finding gold in the most remote places. I mean, the presence of gold is one of the only reasons why we see traces of human civilization up here.
All these settlements are here purely for gold. So all the people that are in those markets and those little towns are searching for gold. It's crazy, in the mountains nearby.
You got small settlements like this one. Every time you ask like, why are you living here in the middle of the desert? It's always the same answer, it's gold. They're here for gold. This is where they sleep and they eat. And they go in the mountains to get gold, basically. And in this specific settlement, we were about to be introduced to another meal that we will almost exclusively eat every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 2 weeks. Fool. No, not fool. Fool. So, what is fool? Fool is basically fava beans. Yeah, as simple as that.
Today's meal, we got food with bread and onions. Let's do this.
Sudanese people value fool a lot. They select the best beans one by one, cook them in those big metal jars, and to them is added peanut oil that they call fool Sudani. To be honest, it's kind of bland, but thankfully fool is usually served with eggs on the side, a slice of not really juicy lemon, onions, salt, and typical Sudani bread. You eat with your hands and use the bread to scoop out the fool.
It got a lot of protein and a healthy type of fat, but also carbohydrates. Food in bed, let's do this.
Throughout the first few days in northern Sudan, fool fueled us. It gave us all the energy we needed as we cycled through the emptiness of the rocky desert plateaus, feeling free and powerful, with all the elements in our favor.
Third day of cycling Sudan. Wow, I never thought I'd say this, but I feel great. The weather's perfect, the wind is in our favor. It's so good. It's so good. Tailwind!
I feel so free. It's very calm. Long roads, nothing on the right or on the left. Wow, it's just incredible, man. After 124 kilometers of cycling through northern Sudan, this is what we get, and this is what we deserve. Fool and eggs. Eating with the hands, best thing ever. Every night so far, we had been camping a couple hundred meters off the road, pitching our tents in the soft desert sands. The desert was so perfect for camping, because there was no soul alive for miles around, and the weather was optimal and never changed. And every morning when we woke up, it was surreal. It was one of the first times in my life where I would hear no sound at all. Nothing. Total silence.
We camped here tonight in the middle of the Sahara Desert. It was beautiful. You hear no sound, you hear nothing, and you see nothing apart from sand and sky.
As we packed up and left the campsite, we weren't fully aware that things were about to change in terms of landscapes for the next few days, as we were getting closer to the Mighty Nile River. The first hints of it? The countless fava bean fields that are used to feed the whole region. We had finished with the first section of the journey to Khartoum, cycling from Wadi Halfa to the first few villages along the longest river in the world. This Sahara Desert crossing was not going to be that desolate after all. The wind is strong today. You got the desert on one side, the Nile on the other, a bit more green, and the beard is growing. Wow! In contrast to the rest of the country that is arid and desertic, the Nile River is the lifeblood of Sudan, and it's used for basically everything. Drinking water, washing, building houses, and especially growing a huge diversity of fruits and veggies that feed the whole country, and sometimes even beyond.
كل الشباب هنا بيزرعوا صح؟ أنت شو بتزرع؟
بزرع تمر، بزرع برتقال، بزرع مانجا، نزرع عنب، نزرع تفاح، احنا شغالين بلح.
Bala.
Hey, you get the point. Everything grows here. But in my opinion, there is one fruit to rule them all. The Sudanese grapefruits.
I always hated grapefruit, but this is the first country where grapefruits are not just good, but freaking incredible. It's really good stuff, and apparently it's some of the best grapefruits in the world.
As we cycled towards the banks of the Nile, we saw the first vestiges of the area, right next to a cemetery. A structure that from up close resembles nothing I've ever seen. I have no idea what this is. It's very interesting. I thought it was a mosque, but it's not, and it's right next to a cemetery. This was just one of the many mud brick structures we witnessed in the region. The most impressive one is the Kerma da Fufa, that is part of one of the largest archaeological sites in Sudan, and that was built during the reign of the Nubian kingdom of Kerma, the culture founded at least 5,500 years ago, and that eventually grew into a large urban center near the abundant resources the Nile helped develop.
What you see behind me is called Dafufa, which means piled sand in Nubian. It dates back from the Nubian kingdom of Kerma from 2500 BC, which is insanely old.
Entire cities in the region were historically built with this mud brick technique. Mud bricks are basically piled, air-dried bricks that are made with a mixture of clay, sand, and water, to which straw is added to bind the materials.
So right behind me is a clay mine. They use that clay to build their houses. Those ladies are digging for clay, and they're probably mixing a part of their house.
This method is still being used to build most of the houses in northern Sudan, except in bigger villages like the one we were reaching now, the village of Abari. We finally had a bit of comfort and an amazing fresh lunch, but my real motivation for being here wasn't the food or having access to the resources we couldn't find in the deserts. There was something else I wanted to find. I heard rumors of a drink that is kept very low-key and that is highly forbidden in Sudan. It was a type of alcohol.
An alcohol that they call Araqi. Obviously, it's a very Muslim country, so it's subject of alcohol. It's very taboo. I asked the locals here, where can I find them? And they all started laughing.
You need alcohol?
Yes. You have?
You drink?
Yes.
So Sudan is very hard.
Nothing's hard if you want to. Araqi is a very taboo topic here, but everybody knows, but they kind of keep it a secret.
It is a secret.
It's like weird, you know?
You cannot find a drinking in the market. In all Sudan,
So where do you find it?
there is a special place.
Where?
I don't know where, because with me it is haram. It is very dangerous. If you drink, your mind can be upside down.
Yeah.
Upside down.
Thank you so much.
We didn't give up and kept asking around until the same guy we met previously referred us to some kids.
I asked the guy, and the kid's gonna tell us where we can find some Araqi.
Really?
Yeah.
But it wasn't that easy. It seemed like nobody wanted to give it away, until one of the kids then referred us again to another man who told us to follow him.
So we found a guy who's bringing us to the next village, make us taste some Araqi. And welcome to Sudan, guys.
We cycled between the fava bean fields for 10 minutes until we arrived to a smaller village. People looked a bit different here. I entered the first mud brick house, met a man, then another, then spoke to a bunch of women, and one of them knew where we could find Araqi.
Now we're in a random village next to the town we were in. We're following this lady.
The woman then brought us to another courtyard where we met this legend. Let me play that again. Yeah, that handshake told me everything I needed to know. We had found it. The mystical, the forbidden, the illegal Sudanese moonshine. Araqi.
Hey, Araqi. Oh, that's Araqi. I'm surrounded with people that are completely drunk. He's so drunk, it's so funny. Cheers. It tastes like tequila. Wow, very good. Cheers. Cheers. Sifal, right. It's crazy. In the middle of rural Sudan, one of the most Muslim countries in the world, you can find some alcohol that tastes like tequila. It's made out of dates. It's crazy.
Araqi is basically a liquor made by mixing dates, which they call here balah, with water and yeast, fermenting the mix, then distilling it. And the woman that we had first followed was preparing new bottles of Araqi. That's when I noticed some tribal marks on her face and asked about them.
Okay.
The town of Kadugli, where she was from, is in South Kordofan, very close to the newest founded country in the world, South Sudan. Sudan was once the biggest country in Africa until 2011, when a brutal civil war erupted based on years of ethnic and religious conflicts. And Sudan got divided into two different countries. The north is more typically Arab and Muslim, while the south is more Christian and African animist. After separation, Sudan became one of the most Muslim countries in the world, incorporating the Sharia law to governmental institutions for years. The religion is omnipresent, and on our journey so far, we've seen mosques in very rural areas, and even the gold miners were stopping everything they were doing to pray 5 times a day. So, during the Sudan Civil War and previously the Darfur War, a number of women fled to the north as refugees, and one of the only professions available to them was brewing Araqi. They already knew the skills for making it, and there always was a reliable demand for it, despite it being highly illegal for a long time. But surprisingly here, they were open to being filmed. They told me they didn't care. Maybe because we were so remote, I'm not really sure. Nowadays, the local brewers are almost exclusively women and are usually called Sitt al-Araqi al-Faddadiyya. So those two beautiful ladies offered us half a bottle of Araqi to get on the road. Maybe we'll get other people drunk with us. That's exactly what we did in one of the next villages, and they were very happy about it. Here's my take on alcohol. I rarely drink, but I like to do it socially or in a cultural context.
بدكم تحكوا شيء عن المنطقة؟
منطقة جميلة جدا جدا، ناس كويسين طيبين
مثل ما شفنا يعني.
نرحب بالضيوف في السياحة، وربنا زي ما بقولوا يوفقكم في طريقكم يا رب العالمين.
Perfect. شكرا. باي باي. شكرا كثير.
The rest of the day cycling along the Nile was simply beautiful. We had a gorgeous view on the Blue River and the many palm trees growing along it. And we decided to stop in one of the tiny villages along the water to spend the night.
We got the Nile right behind us. This is a field of fava beans, I think. Such a magical atmosphere, honestly. Camping right behind tonight in an old Nubian house. It's beautiful. We're like 50 meters away from the Nile. Got that little wind, night wind.
To change up from eating food for every meal, we started purchasing local ingredients to cook.
This is how we eat every night. Everything tastes good after a good day of cycling, so we don't really mind.
There's something truly magical about making the world your home as you travel, and to keep doing the daily basic tasks you would do back home as part of your routine. With the exception of loading up on loads of lip balm and the strongest sunscreen we could find. I mean, all these days under the harsh sun were starting to show its effects on our bodies. And it was going to continue, as today we were about to cycle across another desert patch for a long time. But that's until our expectations got again shattered as we were forced to stop by some of the locals for some tea.
Welcome Cabrinarte.
Welcome to Cabrinarte. Those guys are incredible. They forced us to stop to get some tea. Forced. It's hospitality, but in a forced way. Like, there was no way we could continue cycling without them giving us tea. It's beautiful. Only in Sudan, guys.
And apparently, sharing tea with their guests is never enough in Sudan. They were now inviting us to their garden to eat breakfast and share more about their culture.
So this is our breakfast for today. Hamid and his brothers and friends invited us. You can learn about the world by reading books and articles on the internet. My way of learning about the world and about a country is speaking with beautiful people around a beautiful breakfast. I'm learning so much about the history, the culture, the food.
I make a break in my study because I want to learn other things. I want to learn the real life, what's happening in the world, and not just what we can hear in the news or...
As we finished breakfast, we started learning a bit more about the way of life and the tools that were used by the Nubians for generations.
هذا الصحن زمان كان بياكلوا اسمه الكوز كان عمره 300 سنة ده.
What stood out to me was the method that people used to drink in a region as remote and arid as Nubia.
All around Nubia and Sudan, you're gonna see those clay pots, and they have incredible properties. People here grab water from the Nile that looks super dirty, but actually the clay pot has pores kind of, and it cleans the water and makes it colder.
دي مويه مباشره من النيل بيتخطف الزير ده بيبقى بارد مويه نظيفه
قد ايه وقت بتاخد تبرد الميه
3-4 ساعات بيبقى بارد.
The first time I drank water from this, I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. I was like, how didn't I know this before? We in the West just drink water out of plastic bottles. When you got this, right? 0 carbon emissions, 0 pollution. It's incredible.
We saw those clay pots everywhere along the roads, but as foreigners, we couldn't directly drink from them, even if the water was way cleaner than the Nile. Throughout the generations, the Nubians have developed a specific gut biome that makes them immune to the specific bacteria and viruses found in the water. We were not capable of that.
Cheers. Just kidding.
And that's why we used this water pump to get some water from the pots, just out of safety. As we kept staying around the family, we started learning about Nubian music and instruments and how they work. This, for example, is a kisar.
Hamid is one of the guys who stopped us on the side of the road. He's like a florist, but also a farmer. So he cultivates fava beans and wheat. But he's also a musician, and he plays the oud, and he can sing in Nubian as well as in Arabic. So we're gonna see now.
سلمتك قلبي مأمل 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 خرطوم رجوك جواب باي بجدتي وصفي مسؤول عن لميني تيكي Dike ikamanyin nalenuka Nasgidun najek luka
Wow. شو حلو. Hamid is the man. I'm pretty sure we landed in paradise here. Beautiful music, beautiful people, beautiful nature, perfect weather. This place is incredible and it's getting better and better.
Sudan is very nice country.
That day, hospitality didn't end here. Later on, after arriving in a town called Dongola, we stumbled upon another amazing family.
We just arrived in Dongola and Ashraf right here. He saw us on the side of the street. He saw that we were lost and we were trying to find a place to sleep. He was like, you know what? Just come. I'll host you. Shukran كتير Ashraf. وشرفنا. حبيبي شكرا.
And turns out, Ashraf was a Boy Scout. Yes, there are Boy Scouts in Sudan, and Tim was shocked as he himself was a Boy Scout back in France.
North of the Sudan here, from Zadungula.
Oh. And Ashraf gave him his only scout scarf as a welcome gift.
Quand tu repars en France, tu te rappelleras de lui avec ce foulard. Ouais.
No, it's not possible.
No. Really?
T'es au Soudan, tu peux pas refuser un cadeau.
Apart from being a scout, Ashraf has 3 wives, and consequently, many kids.
Yusuf!
He is polygamous, like quite a few men in Sudan. This country was making me meet various people with very different traditions and behaviors, which kind of helped me put my own reality into perspective.
This is Amjad. He's 23 years old like me. It's crazy to think that he was born in rural Sudan and me in Lebanon, and we're the same age. We have completely different lives, but such a cool experience to meet people like that along the road. He cooked his own food today. شو اسم الطبخة؟ ملوها. He's 20, his name is Abdullah, and he's married. Completely different reality from mine. He has a kid that's 9 months old. I can't even imagine myself getting married at 19 and having a kid by 20, you know? Part of the perks of traveling, opening your mind to new things and new ways of thinking.
But also new ways of living. Has had to adapt to the way of life of the locals and to what was available in northern Sudan, including hygiene. It was challenging, especially as part of a cycling trip.
Wow, I look super dirty, man. It's crazy.
To give you an idea, I had my first shower in a week at Ashraf's place.
The water is freezing. This is part of the adventure.
And soon we were going to be challenged in a very different way.
We slept in this room, we put our tents here, and it was great. And my bike just fell, which is not the best way to start the day, but shukran mutasim. Isra umutasim. Hello.
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 As we left Ashraf's place, we were about to go remote again, with our second desert crossing.
Entering a big desert stretch for the next 2 days. Got headwind. I'm exhausted.
This patch of desert was the most remote part of our journey since Cairo, and was infamous for its insane headwinds. We cycled for 3 days from the town of Dongola to the town of Karima, on a road that felt like it was only built for us. There was nothing around. The only things we saw were a handful of trucks, beautiful sunsets, and a few wild camels. To fight boredom, I listened to many podcast episodes and had long conversations about the most random things with Flo and Tim. But for most of the time, I was in a long meditative state. I rarely felt as free and humbled than on this road. It was one of the few zones across our journey in Africa where we were able to do some long night cycles without any worries.
This is what it looks like to cycle at night in the middle of the Sudanese desert. It's very peaceful, you got a lot of stars, but there is no one on the road.
After camping for 2 days in tents full of sand, we had arrived somewhere very special. Somewhere barely known to the outside world. A place forgotten in time. The pyramids of Jabal Barkal.
So after 2 days in the desert, exhausted, the reward is right behind me. It's the Barkal pyramids. There's about twice as many pyramids in Sudan than in Egypt. No one talks about that. And yet, here we are, and there's no tourists around.
The Nubian pyramids were built over a period of a few hundred years to serve as tombs for the kings, queens, and wealthy citizens. Built out of granite and sandstone, 40 of the 200 pyramids in Sudan were partially demolished by an Italian treasure hunter, Giuseppe Ferlini. Those pyramids are some of the few remains and reminders that the region of Nubia was an early cradle of civilization, producing several complex societies that engaged in trade and industry. Before Nubia was Nubia, the region was called the Kingdom of Kush, occupying an area covering almost all of modern Egypt and northern Sudan. It was an advanced civilization in its own right, that we usually never hear about because of how long it has been overshadowed by its ancient Egyptian neighbor, that became more prominent and famous with time. The Kushites had their own unique language and script, maintained a complex economy based on trade and industry, and developed urban societies with uniquely high levels of female participation. And throughout the millennia, the Kushites established three main kingdoms: Kerma, that we've already visited, Meroe, that we'll be exploring soon as part of the wildest adventures of my life, and Napata, which is now the modern town of Karima, where we currently were. Karima literally means the generous, the honorable in Arabic, probably because of the abundance of life stemming from the Nile nearby, but I would like to believe that it was named after the generosity of the people here, that we were once again going to be blessed with. As we left the pyramids, I started feeling nauseous and having stomach aches, maybe because of the food I had just ate, or the last few days being under the harsh sun.
Just stopped on the side of the road to take a shit. Massive diarrhea. I didn't go to the toilet for the past probably 4 days or something.
While exiting the city, we decided to stop on the side of the roads, where I laid down almost all day, taking it easy and resting. I socialized a bit with some of the locals and tried being productive when I felt better, by editing some of the videos you get to see on this channel.
Sometimes you need to be a bit resourceful to find electricity to be able to edit and pump out those videos. This is crazy, man. I'm exhausted today.
What I'm doing isn't easy. I've been editing every free time I have, in some of the most random spots in this journey across Africa. Yes, even when I'm sick. And that's because I believe that sharing stories can have a real impact on the world. So I would really appreciate it if you can support my work by subscribing to the channel and supporting me financially on Patreon. That's what will keep me going.
This is the behind the scenes of recording a voiceover for videos when you're in rural Sudan. There's no other way to do it. This is the most comfortable place I found. There's nothing around.
Meanwhile, Tho and Tim were already trying to converse with some of the locals through drawings on the ground. And after I joined them, I started speaking with them too. And that's when I met Tariq and his son, who decided to host us for the night.
We got adopted by our new Sudanese family and we'll get offered some tea no matter the time of the day. It's 11:30 p.m. and it's always shy time.
And the next morning, we also had tea at the same spot. As we discussed with Tariq, he suggested to drive us around town and show us the local market.
Tariq here drove us around town, hosted us in his house, bought us some tea and breakfast, and he didn't even know our names. And now he's just asking, what's your names, by the way? You know, that's Sudanese hospitality. You just give, and then you start getting interested in the person. It's beautiful. Tariq.
The market was not what I expected. It was extremely vibrant and buzzing with life.
So right now we're exploring the souks and it's pretty hectic, I can tell you that. Right behind me you can see it's the cattle market of a city called Tangasi. You got hundreds of men selling their cattle. They're eating camels in the back. It's freaking epic, honestly.
It was almost surreal to see this many people in action in town. The elders negotiating prices for the cattle, the youth wandering around and observing the chaos, and the camels, goats, mules, and cows not really understanding what's happening. Veggies, clothes, tea, everything was sold here. It's fascinating to observe people in the markets of this region of the world. People here look very different from each other because they all come from different regions ethnically, but commerce and economy brings them together to sell whatever others don't have access to. As we came back to grab our bikes at Tariq's place and keep cycling, that's when I noticed that sand can be used in such ingenious ways and for so many different purposes.
When we left the bikes to go to the market, he was like, don't worry, if someone comes and tries to steal, I can look at the sand and I can see the footprints of anyone that comes in this courtyard and I'll identify who it is in the neighborhoods. I saw him a couple of times carry the sand to see the direction of the wind of the day. He told us, you guys are lucky, today the wind is in your back. Or for example, he used the sand to draw things, to explain it to us when we don't understand. He also told me that it's very easy to notice if a snake or a scorpion is around because they also leave traces on the sand. So you better be safe than sorry.
But with cycling, sand can also be your enemy. It's very hard to move on sand, as we were again going to experience when we embarked on our last desert segment before reaching our destination.
This is our last stop for 3 full days in the desert until we reach Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. And we get offered our food. The guy's like, oh, I paid for you guys. You are our guest. There's another guy who goes to the supermarket and buys us cold water. Yeah, it's just beautiful. Like, this is Sudanese hospitality.
With the great distances we cycled in those last 3 days, through the emptiness and heat of the deserts, I had a lot of time to think about the question, What makes the people so hospitable and friendly in such an inhospitable place? There could be multiple theories to explain this, but in my opinion, I think it's actually directly linked to the harsh nature of the geography and climate of the land.
This desert patch is really, really long. I'm sweating buckets, man. You can see the sweat on my face.
Deserts are hostile and hard to live in. They're hot, dry, windy, and draining. They're empty, and it can get quite lonely here. The only signs of life that we were seeing are a couple of bush, many camels, and the omnipresence of death. If people can count on each other in the desert, they die. So everyone is aware of each other's needs, as they have the exact same ones, and they're trying to fulfill them. They're fighting against the same enemy, and that builds empathy and increases their chances of survival by helping each other out. But I think it also goes deeper. There's also the belief in Arabic and Islamic culture that the more you give and do good deeds, the more you'll receive in this life and the next one. That's maybe why the Middle East is famous for being so kind and hospitable worldwide. I also think that a place that is prone for boredom, loneliness, and need for survival influences the behavior, mentality, and culture of people here, and make them a lot more observant, curious, and contemplative about things, to make the most out of what is available. The Nubians are all about developing an abundance mindset within a very scarce environment. They are grateful for everything that is given to them, even foreigners cycling through the desert and passing by their houses. And after cycling for so long in this environment, we could totally understand and relate when it comes to appreciating those small things that are given to you. Like, for example, finding this one stand of watermelon during this last brutal desert crossing. Trust me, it's one of the best feelings in the world.
It's our third night in the desert. We've been doing more than 100 kilometers per day. There's something just so magical about cycling all day long and just setting up your tent, cooking your own food, and sleeping and repeating again. We're arriving in Khartoum tomorrow. I can't believe it. We've done like about 1,000 kilometers in Sudan only.
There's something so magical about looking at a map and thinking that my own two legs took me from here to there. Human-powered adventures are very rewarding.
This is our last straight line to Khartoum. Wow, crossing the Sahara desert is no joke, man. Overheating for miles and miles. It's a while we haven't seen any civilization, so I'm really excited.
As we were getting closer to our destination, I looked back on this 2-week adventure we had just lived. Nubia is one of the most authentic, underrated, and genuine places Tim, Flo, and I had ever visited. It taught me so much and opened my mind and heart in so many ways. Maybe this means that when you remain curious and open to the world opens back up to you. I had never been offered that much tea in my lifetime. I've never been welcomed like a brother in that many households and shared that many meals with strangers. We met gold miners, farmers, alcohol brewers, merchants, restaurant owners, musicians, and themselves found their own way to be surrounded by a strong support system, whether through valuing the importance of family, as we saw with almost everyone we met, or helping out anyone that is in need, ourselves included. The Sudanese happen to be some of the most laid-back, resourceful, and generous people I met, and I'll never forget how they helped us survive this whole section of the immense and challenging Sahara deserts.
We finally made it to the Khartoum district, and our couch surfing host is waiting for us. Wow, we did it.
It felt as weird as surreal to arrive to the capital. We were going to spend a month with Talal, a couch surfer we connected with who lives in a neighborhood called Umdurman.
Day one, night one in Khartoum. This is Talal, our couch surfing host. Super incredible guys. What a welcome, guys. Look at that. It's crazy. It's a South Sudanese party.
Breaking news coming in from Sudan. Heavy gunfire across the capital.
Explosions in Sudan's Khartoum.
Fears a fully fledged civil war.